Good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that introduction and welcome. And I'd like to, on behalf of my panelists, welcome you all here to the ugly building, which looks great on the inside, as we know. My name is Neville Hobson. I'm your moderator of this discussion. My job is to try and keep us on track for reaching some interesting points at the end of our time. We've got about an hour in total. And we want to actually make this as interactive as possible. So if you have a burning point to make, an agreement or disagreement or something entirely different, don't hesitate to say it, although wait for the microphone because this thing is being recorded and you need to have your voice on that recording as well. But we're not going to just do a talk and then ask you for your comments. We want to engage with you. So at various points, just to keep you on your toes, I will actually be interactively asking you questions as well. So we'll see how that goes. If you don't answer, well, we'll carry on talking. Before we get cracking, I said who I am. Let me give you a quick 30 seconds. I'm an independent communication consultant. I live out near Reading, so I'm not in London most of the time. And I've been involved in organizational communication, internal, externally, for about 30 years. Like most of you, I'm sure, digital has been a big part of what I do for the past decade since social took off with blogging back in the early part of this century. Oh, boy, doesn't that sound great saying it like that. So I do quite a lot of this stuff. I have an innate curiosity for what makes people tick with technology, why they use it, what they get out of it, and what it means for organizations. So that's my interest driver. So I'm a blogger, I'm a podcaster, and so I tend to get involved in all this stuff quite a lot. So on my left, Luke Brindley-Jones. On my right, Brandon Butterworth. Let me start with Luke and ask each of my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves.
Okay, thanks, Neville. So kind of like Neville, I live in the digital world, but probably more embedded in the social world. So I spend my life helping mainly large brands to understand social media, to get it to embed throughout their organizations, from sort of marketing through customer service to their staff as well. So I've worked with quite a big number of big brands like that. Also worked with some celebrities, which is good fun, trying to get them to sort of embrace social and use it properly and not get into trouble, which they sometimes do. I also, so I run an agency. We're based in Cambridge, and that's my kind of day job. In terms of my interest in the discussion today, I'll mainly be talking about the sort of, again, the social aspects, both in terms of our use of social media and how that's evolved, but also how businesses and high street businesses in particular can respond to that and react. So I'll go into that.
Yeah, I'm Brandon Butterworth, Chief Scientist, BBC Research and Development in the building next door. So I put the BBC on the internet, did a load of things for iPlayer, YouView, all sorts of things coming along. I spent most of the time making things the BBC doesn't want, which is interesting that you've got a space here where they actually want people to innovate and come and create things. That's not the way the rest of industry has necessarily worked. It's now becoming the common way people are thinking they're going to get some innovation in there. So lots of companies are now opening up on the back of Google and various other people opening up such spaces. I'm not sure all of them really get what they're trying to do with it. You know, they build a space and think they're going to innovate in it, but not sure if they've actually figured out what they're going to do with it if some innovation happened. So it's interesting to see how companies adapt to a future digital world and if they will survive in it. Because usually a company doesn't make a leap from one generation to another. Normally someone else comes up and replaces them. So you've seen a lot of other media and things now being replaced by Facebook and various other things. So it's an interesting challenge for us to get the BBC that's managed to do radio, then TV as two successive things. Can we actually make it live in the digital world of the future and live for a third generation?
Good scene setting there. So that's going to, I think, play a role in our discussion over the next hour or so. Let me set a scene a bit in this second discussion on these DigiTalks that we are here for. iConsumerism is the main word in the description if you've read it. There's a strong focus in there of our topics to talk about related to the high street. And that's part of the scene I'm going to set, which could which I think will serve as a platform to expand the discussion a bit to embrace other areas such as Luke touched on, and indeed Brandon as well. But let me start with this scene setter. So one of the questions that you will have noted on the website describing the event is this one: is a digital world a threat or a boon to the high street? And we're going to be, hopefully, not so much, I don't think, answering the question, although you might have some thoughts on it as well, and a lot of other interesting ones as well. One thing I would add, by the way, if you tweet about the event, and please do, the hashtag DigiTalks. If you want to mention us, please feel free. L. Brindley Jones, BBZAA, and Jangles. I'm sure you remember those things. 3 A's. Did I say only 2?
Yeah.
AAA, AAA, okay? BBZ, I like that, BBZ though, BBZ, AAA. So L. Brindley Jones, BBZ, AAA, and Jangles, just so you got that. And DigiTalks, don't forget that one. You probably pay attention to the media as much as anyone, I do, and look at the sensationalist headlines over the last month in particular about what's happening in our high streets up and down the country. A report was published a couple of weeks back that looked at the state of retail up until 2018, so over the next 5 years, and it's not a pretty picture. So the mainstream media, for their sins, were full of the kinds of headlines that make people buy newspapers, and we're all guilty of that, I suppose, in one way or another. The Express says 60,000 stores are going to close in 5 years as our high streets begin to die. The Mail, High Street Armageddon, 1 in 5 stores are going to close and 300,000 people will lose their jobs by 2018. Marketing Week, a trade publication, 1 in 5 shops to close as e-commerce grows. One of the public sector magazines talks about UK retail facing a crisis. I even saw one paper, I forget which one, it might have been I thought it was the Mail, maybe not, but basically saying that the high street is in trouble because of the internet. So therefore it has to be so, I suppose. But the picture is looking very bleak indeed, according to this report. It's talking about lovely numbers, lovely metrics. The retail environment across the country reducing by phenomenal numbers as stores go out of business and people lose their jobs. Online is growing by leaps and bounds. One of the metrics from this retail report shows that retail sales are up 12.7%, and they will jump to 21.5% over the next 5 years. That's quite a growth. They're talking about lots more companies going into administrations. Some will survive, but some won't, and I think we couldn't really argue with that too much. And the high street will continue to suffer. 41% of town centres will lose nearly 30,000 stores, they say, by 2018. I would argue that that picture undoubtedly will come to pass exactly as they say, assuming no one does anything about it, which is unlikely, I would imagine. But we are in a state of change, of huge evolution at a society level. And in my opinion, that touches on what my colleagues are also going to be addressing today, because you're talking about changing behaviours. Each of us in this room is a consumer in one way or another. And you will exhibit much of the behaviours this report talks about, which, according to the interpretation of the research by some, is instrumental in the demise of the high street. So all our purchasing from Amazon, all the ways we do research on the products we're going to buy, it's our fault then, isn't it? That's why the high street's in such trouble. Mary Portas is a name well known to all of us in this room, I'm sure, who is doing some very interesting work through the Portas towns, these regeneration ideas to develop initiatives in towns and cities up and down the country with government support. I think it's a terrific program. A question I have, and I'm not saying this is how it is, I'm wondering what difference it's actually making. Is that part of change that's happening, or is it something that isn't really going to matter as things are evolving so quickly in our own behaviours? Do we really care about the high street when we exhibit such growth in our own behaviours in buying online and ignoring local shops? Is that part of the problem? How will digital help all of this? You've got stories we've been hearing in recent, I guess the last 6 months or so, the demise of some big well-known names. Jessop's being one, the camera store, HMV being another, Comet being another. Some great anecdotal stories emerging. Jessop's, for instance, with the sign in one of their stores saying, the staff at Jessop's would like to thank you for shopping with Amazon. Great one. You've probably heard the story out of Australia of a specialty shop selling a certain type of food product that charges you $5 to browse if you don't buy anything. If you come into the shop and leave without paying, they'll charge you $5. Not quite sure how they're collecting that. They send people running after you or something. But that's someone trying to do something to arrest an inevitability. And this is the way they think it's the way to do it. And of course, it makes the headlines. We have the emergence of new words that haven't yet hit the OED, but as Tweet did last week, but it might soon enough, showrooming. Are you all familiar with that phrase, showrooming? If not, you will hear us talk about that soon. That's basically the idea of shopping with your mobile device in a store, and you research and buy the product elsewhere online whilst you're in the store. There's a companion word which I haven't quite figured out exactly what it means, called web rooming is another one. So you hear all these jargony terms, but they do serve to focus the shifts that are happening in our behaviors. And part of the aspect of the shift in our behaviors is the availability of means to satisfy our desires to do the things we want to do. Technology is a driver of that, but they go hand in glove, I believe, the behavior and the new tech. So you then look at the flip side of all of this. You know, is it so dire that things are just going out of business? Are people losing jobs left, right, and centre? Well, of course it is not. There are some interesting things going on. I came across one when I was looking into this a few days ago. Topshop, the big retailer, clothing retailer, did a deal with Google that they fitted little cameras to a fashion show with all the models walking down the catwalk, so you could see what they were seeing. And they were broadcasting that on their website, and that drove a lot of eyeballs and traffic to and interest to the website. You're seeing things like that on a similar level with these new wearable technology like Google Glass. I've seen people experimenting with wearing these things in fashion shows, where else, of course, in California. But that's where some of this innovation or experimentation is going on. So you're seeing stuff like that. You're seeing people shift from the desktop and the laptop to tablets and mobiles in finding things. So you can search online wherever you happen to be. If it's a mobile device and you're searching for a restaurant or a store or something, it will give you valuable data on how to get there, how far away it is, some price indications, and you make your decisions quite quickly on what to do with that. That's part of our changing landscape. The question I would ask, and I throw this out to my colleagues, in fact, is does that mean then that part of the savior behavior, if you will, for the high street, and indeed any other business, high street or not, is the shift to digital? Do you have to be online? Is it about your discoverability on Google is really the route you have to go? What if you're not? I don't know about you where you live, but I did a little bit of very simple research in my local town, looking at local businesses online. Out of 20 or so shops of various types, from plumbers to accountants to fashion stores, you name it, without exception, their websites, as our American friends would say, suck terribly badly. They are awful. They're stuck in the mid-90s, it seems to me. I mean, some would even call them e-commerce sites, for God's sake. So, no one's social, well, with a few exceptions, but the ones that are really are very social. They get it a lot. And maybe that's what this is all about. But I wonder, is it to do with discoverability? Is it being found on Google the answer to all of these things? That is the salvation for being able to understand the shifts that are happening and take advantage of them. Is that really the answer to it all? So I guess the translation of that to me then is, could you say then that all you really need is a little bit of imagination? Is that all we need to do? Luke, what does it look like to you?
Okay. Well, there's a lot to get into with that. So, yes, I think imagination helps, but my thought on this is that you can't look at the high street as the high street as such. It breaks down. You do have high street stores. You've talked about Topshop, and those are a breed, and a lot of those are dying out or struggling. But equally, you have smaller shops, so you have local shops, and that whole area as well, and a lot of those have suffered as well. But I think theirs is a slightly different problem. They're not necessarily having their livelihoods eaten away by Amazon and those kind of guys in the same way. So they're trying to find their space in this ecosystem as well. And then you've got new ideas, new businesses. So there's a whole area of innovation in certainly in retail with things like Groupon, where you can go online, you can buy stuff in a completely different way that you couldn't do before. Living Social is another one like that. And so, there's that area of innovation where we're actually starting to provide jobs, provide new services, provide interesting opportunities as well. So it's sort of, for me, it breaks down like that. And the solution for some of these, for some of the big brands might be, as you said, doing stuff that like Topshop is doing, or I know Brooks Brothers, for example, will let you design your own tie or your own shorts or whatever. So there's that sort of collaborative approach. And then there are other stores that are actually trying to reward you for sharing stuff with your friends. So they're bringing the whole social aspect in and saying, yeah, fine, experience this, but make sure you tell your friends. And so opportunities are coming there. So I don't think it's just that simple, being imaginative. I think each of one of these businesses in a different sort of area needs to focus on why they're relevant to us. What is it that the consumer will see in that business and say, yeah, I need to get involved. So that's my kind of opening gambit.
I'm happy. Yeah. All the times they started to look the same brands, every place you go, no choice. So it's good that some of those are getting out of internet. Might have something interesting for a change. But the idea that a town centre should be just a bunch of shops, a retail opportunity. There used to be lots of things in town centres, things to see and do as well as the shops. Or you go to the local shop and you actually talk with the people in there, and you don't go to Tesco and talk with the staff there. So the whole social aspects of the high streets has disappeared anyway. Now a lot of that is down to just the large retailers pushing out all the small people you might have known and built up a relationship with. So the social thing you're saying used to be there in the towns, and we've gone through a phase where through consolidation in retail, the big brands have taken over, they've pushed out small people, and you can have the same thing everywhere, which is great if you just want to go everywhere and get the same thing. But actually you go to different places because they have different things. There's something about the locality, the people there, the trades that are local and so on. So I think worrying about it is, it's missing the point. People worried about losing the cotton industry and didn't worry about, actually, that's over, what comes next? So I think the interesting thing is, what does the internet do for regenerating those towns with something that is valuable to people, what's useful to them, what will get them to talk to each other? Or actually, is it just that they're totally dead? Most people's conversations are now just going to take place electronically, and you're just going to sit in your home and never go outside and have everything delivered to you. No, I don't mind, actually I do mind a little bit, but for the way the high streets are at the moment, I don't care at all. It'd be great to see something other than just charity shops, because they're just filling out all the places that small businesses couldn't actually afford to rent anymore, because someone large would come up and price them out of the market, take all their customers away. Things like Tesco's, they sell you food. They go into a small town, build a shop there, suddenly they start selling clothes, electrical goods, and they just kill all the other retailers around there. So in some ways it'd be good if those people went away and new business could come up. And you see it in some areas where people have built up boutique businesses and it's become high-end, mainly fairly posh areas where people can afford to sustain their overheads, but they've moved into more niche things, finding out what people actually want rather than the same branded goods and being pushed on everybody. So the social aspect of people like Tesco and everyone using it is really just marketing. It's trying to get people to take more of the same goods. It's not really about finding out what people want, what variety you can have in things. I think the thing that the digital generation gives you is there is more scope for variation. It doesn't have to be the same stuff anyway. There's more space for people to do their own thing, try new ideas, find out what people want, even if it only means being a niche. Because one problem with business is everything's got to be bigger all the time. This is the way industry's gone over the last sort of 10 or 20 years, is the idea that a business can be small and sustainable and stay as it was and just carry on like that, being a local shop or whatever, has gone away. Every business is now targeted on, you have to be bigger, you have to be growing every year, you have to be expanding, opening new shops, and you just get, usually these businesses hit their event horizon where they've just expanded so much, mostly on hype or other people's money, and then they hit that point where actually they've overexpanded and they can't sustain what they're doing, and what were interesting businesses that people would seek out just disappear.
Interesting perspectives. I mean, I'm not here to defend big companies like Tesco. We don't have anyone here from Tesco or any of those retailers to provide a point of view on why they do what they do. Maybe we're straying into areas of corporate social responsibility, all that kind of stuff. But we talk about, you mentioned, big brands driving out small business. I'm not sure I'd agree with that without some specifics of what you mean by that. You could argue, I suppose, that Are people, I mean, the shift in the shape and look of the high street in typical towns up and down the country is twofold, is it not? Is it in reflection to what people like to have in their community and the ability to buy stuff when they want? Is it the ability to, get those strawberries in from Kenya when they want any time of the year rather than have to just do it in the summer?
I think that's the difference, though, Neville, isn't it?
Right.
It's coming down to the purpose of that business. So the purpose of a Tesco's or a big supermarket is to deliver you food very effectively along a supply chain that is so smooth and so slick that you get those strawberries at £1.50 instead of the local shop or whatever that can give you those, can't give you those at that price. Whereas, so that's...
But you can only have the strawberries they decide you have. If you like a different variety.
That seems to be the way.
But that is part of the landscape. So if you don't like those, well, your choice then is not to buy them, or if you prefer something else, they don't have them.
But if you look at how Tesco operate, generally they'll have some fairly expensive branded name products in there. They figure out which ones sell, and then they take them off the shelves and put their own branded equivalent on there, and then you can't buy that product anymore.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I mean, that's a business practice. I'm not sure we want to be going into that area here, to be frank. But I think, if everyone's like that, well, do we know if that's true? I'm not sure that we do. The business practice of a company like Tesco or Asda or Sainsbury's or any of these large firms is a legitimate business practice. Whether we like it or think socially it's not the best way of doing it is another matter in my view. I think the consequence of what they're doing is partly reflected in the shifting behaviours we're seeing and the shifting shape of the high street. So I don't know whether it's valid to say that, a big store or a big company develops a retail park and therefore the high street dies in that town. Maybe the high street evolves, and part of the consequence of that evolution is some stores are going to get a business because they can't evolve. Now, I can't make a comment whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what happens.
But I think we're missing the key thing, which is this is all down to us. You included this in your introduction, but Tesco's wouldn't do what they're doing, and Asda wouldn't do what they're doing if we didn't want that. And that's if that's what we want, and we care most about the price that we get and that experience.
We think about that. We just
that's another question, whether it's conscious. Yeah. But the other thing, the response that I think is there for smaller businesses and local businesses to jump on is what you miss when you do that, which is the community feel, which is the freshness of your strawberries or whatever it is, which is the bumping into people, knowing the shopkeeper's name, that kind of stuff, which to me, you might just say, well, you could do that offline, you don't need digital for that. But I actually think that social media in particular is one way of those people reaching out to their local communities when those people maybe don't come by anymore because they're going in the car to Tesco's or whatever.
But social media doesn't work like that. You talk with all your friends very far away and not to the people in the next house.
Oh, no, but if those friends are using that particular shop or using that particular cafe and you're on Facebook, you'll be seeing it. You'll be seeing the updates. And that's how it could work. And that's how it is working for a lot of small businesses. I was giving an example to Neville earlier on, which is there's a cafe in the next village from where I live that they started up, and I looked at it and went, oh my God, you're going to last a week because nobody lives in that village, and anybody who does drives to the station and goes to London. And actually, they're thriving. They have a Facebook page. Everybody goes on there. They post up their latest brownies. They share that kind of stuff. They offer discounts. If you go in and you've liked them, you get a free shot of coffee, all that kind of stuff. And it works, and it's building a community beyond their door. So that's the only thing I think...
Well, that's what I was saying about, the opportunities there. Yeah. If all those big companies take out all the current businesses and some of the big brands go away and leave some places empty, if they come down to the central price, there's opportunity for people to do these things.
Yes.
They do attract things.
Yeah, we're violently agreeing, I think.
Yeah.
That's it.
So let me then bring the question to you both then, of that first one we talked about. Is it just imagination? I mean, what you've described, Luke, with the coffee shop in your town, where, the owner of that store provided something that that attracted people to that coffee shop, where you were fearing you're going to be out of business because it's not going to work, and something he did worked. Mm-hmm. What was that down to? His imagination?
Well, it was partly down to me being the person who went in for coffee there, telling him he ought to get on Facebook. But I won't take all the credit for that. But there are lots of small businesses doing that, and it's not necessarily just that. I mean, I was talking as well about there's a site called Cash Mobbers, which has emerged, and the idea of that is that you find a local business that's struggling and you create a campaign where you all go there on a certain day and buy some stuff, right? Now, sounds a bit gimmicky, and it might just be a one-off thing. But they did it in a bookshop in Hackney called Pages, and 100 people showed up for this cash mob on a certain day, certain time. And for 90 minutes, this shop was just crowded with people. They sold 100 books in an hour and a half, and the previous 2 days they'd sold 7 books, right? So that was the initial impact. But the other thing was, they sort of got a sense of, well, we could do this again. We could be part of the community. We could bring people in. We could, we were just saying before, we could offer free coffees. We could, have a book reading. And I think businesses, it is imagination. You're right, but businesses that have a little bit of that can leverage it. And the social piece is crucial, I think. Social media.
Well, let's talk a bit about that in that case. Let me throw out something that I experienced the other day. I was at an event on Monday that was to do with a debate surrounding the demise of the high street. And it was a sort of an open soapbox affair. People would stand up and give an opinion as to what they thought was going on. What struck me about it was something I've experienced similar in other type of discussions, was that there were some people there with extremely passionate opinions about what the causes were of the demise of the high street, points about people like Tesco and their behaviours and all that kind of stuff. Yet no one could offer a solution. So we had lots of opinions and no avenue for how do we do something other than the imagination point. And I'm wondering, is that the best we can actually expect? Surely not. Yet, is it likely to be down to these small steps of individuals, such as the coffee shop in Cambridge? The role of social in getting the word out surely is the magic ingredient in all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, even big businesses have cottoned on to this first. I mean, KFC in the US did a study of the impact of social media on their sales, and they say that if somebody's interacted with them through social media, it increases their likelihood to spend more by between 2 and 7 times, if I get that stat right. Sorry. So they spend between 2 and 7 times more than if they haven't interacted with them on social media. And those kind of stats, they take them very seriously, and they're investing a lot into this area. Whereas usually the middle sort of level businesses, certainly in my experience, are the ones that are really lagging behind. So they're not the one inspired guy in the cafe who can just do it because he can. They're also not the guys who have a big social media team and a big marketing team ready to be on the latest thing. They're the guys in the middle who just are kind of trying to make ends meet while their margins are cutting down to nothing. So that's the killing field. That's that middle area that I fear for. I was interested that there are some businesses that sort of size in the room today as well. So I'm glad you're here, basically. Well,
that's actually an opportunity to ask a question. Has anyone got a view on this? I mean, has anyone influenced the way Luke might have been with this, the role of social? Would you go to a coffee shop like the one in Cambridge you talked about and talk about it online? Do you do that? Does anyone got a point of view they want to offer with that?
Yes.
Sorry. I have an example which is very relevant, I think. I used to work with a company that made leather bags, and they do sell it. They do sell them in Topshop. So it's a very small company. They used to make the leather bags in Bolivia. So that's really far away. But because of some delay in shipment, they couldn't honor their online orders. So they said on Twitter, guys, we have a delay. We will have to. It will take about 2 weeks to send you over the bags. But what the community on Twitter did, it was amazing. They reacted and they said, well, you know what, we really love your products, we can find a way. So basically, the community on Twitter offered some solutions for the company to produce the bags in UK. So that meant on the long term, 3 months or so, employment in UK, new designs. Of course, it meant also that the Bolivians had no work, but anyway.
There's a consequence for all these things, yeah.
It was a huge change, and of course the sales went up. People got employed, so only because of a Twitter interaction, and only because the company was very honest. online.
The point for that as well, though, and this is one thing that certainly as a social media consultant coming into businesses, and often you get businesses who start with social and then they stop and they say, oh, it didn't work. And it's usually because they haven't given it the time and effort to build up a community and start relationships with people. And that's obviously what that company had done. They'd been out there, they'd obviously been doing the right thing, and people felt that they were part of the company effectively. And it takes time, and it takes skill, and it takes energy, and it takes imagination to be in that position. But
it does.
Amazing story.
If I can throw one briefly in as well, I saw a man speak at a conference last week, the CEO of a company called Naked Wines. Has anyone bought from Naked Wines? It's a mail order, talking about the community relationships over time they have built up, and they're significant. And what happened to one particular wine grower, an English woman living in the south of France, where she was out and some people vandalized her production and opened the taps and drained all her wine away. She was effectively out of business. But the community at Naked Wines rallied around and raised money, six-figure sum within about 8 hours. They put up money to enable her to get back on her feet again. And it was worked out that she'd repaired over a certain time. But the community did that. It wasn't she went to the bank or tried to find someone. They all rallied around to do that. So you could add that to this mix, that the value of a community at times of crisis, obviously, can be quite significant. But that has to be built up over time. It isn't something that you magically make happen. So to me, that's an important ingredient in what anyone needs to do to take advantage of, I suppose, shifting behaviours in people and where we like to buy the things from that we tend to.
Well, it's also a question of what people make.
Well, there is that,
Because at the moment, someone decides that a lot of things are going to be made in China, and you're going to buy those things, and they're going to be in every Tesco, and you have no choice. Whereas now people are saying, actually, we don't decide what we're making. We'll go to Kickstarter, and enough of us want the same thing, we'll get someone to make it. So I think the traditional model of what you have to buy and where you have to buy it from is potentially going to change.
Yes, I would agree with you. And in fact, that is an illustrative example of the shifts in society as a whole, because I would argue that what's driving that is people's desires and preferences and the knowledge that they can get something and someone will provide and satisfy that need.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be Sony making it.
No, it doesn't.
Usually it's not Sony nowadays. Yeah. It's small individuals, get a bunch of people together. Again, most of them found online, they will make a product for an audience.
Right. Well, you then, I think this then gets into areas of the so-called sharing economy.
It doesn't matter, does it?
Right. Well, that touches on another element of this. Does the high street go away? I know you have a view about the high street, Brent. Do you want to share that?
It's not so much a view, it's just, you see what's going on. It's like you think, do you really need this high street? What should it be? And I think if you're going to have those shops there, you want something you want to go to. The days of just going out and mindlessly wandering around the shops on a Saturday afternoon, there's nothing else to do. I think those days are gone, because you can satisfy the basic things you pick up on your way. And actually, a lot of things you pick up, you don't want to carry anyway. Lugging big bags around things, just have them delivered. Actually, I think what you want now is you want to go out and find something more interesting to do. You want to be entertained. You want to find new things. And maybe you just won't go to the same high street. Maybe if all the high streets weren't the same, you go to another one. Visit another one. Maybe there's a niche of something that you hear about through your social circles that's something in another village, has something you're interested in. So maybe that Saturday you go and see something different, something you haven't experienced before. So I think the thing that the high streets are missing is the element of discovery. There's not anything new that's worth going there to find out that you can't just Google.
I also think, can I just chime in on that? So definitely discovery, I think, is powerful, but also having some kind of ownership of the shop or the institute or whatever it is can be so powerful as well. So I don't want to talk about every business in my area, but there was a pub in the next village which was failing dismally, and it was a crappy pub, terrible place, you wouldn't go there. So what the people in the village did was they bought it. So they bought it, and you could chip in 500 quid and you could have a share of the pub. And of course, they made it a bit nicer, they painted it up, they put someone in there who was smiling, and actually it's a thriving business now. But it's because everyone goes in and goes, this is my pub, and they feel like it's part of their business. But you don't have to give away the business to do that. So there's a phrase which certainly in social media at the moment is big, which is the collaborative economy. So the idea of taking your customers and not just having them out there as customers, but bringing them in and getting them to help design stuff. And like, there's great examples of Lego doing this even a few years ago, where they'd say, you know, come and design what should be the next Lego set. And they have all these Lego fanatics who are all, dare I say it, 35 to 50-year-old men, who just were madly keen on this, you know. But every company can start to do this now in some different way. And there's no better way of having a community than starting.
What do you think about Second Life? What happened to Second Life? Because I know some brands were trying to build virtual shops and virtual experiences for online. So, what do you think about Second Life?
Yeah, it's rubbish, wasn't it? And the whole idea
it
that
worked, but then so what happened to it? Why do you think it didn't
you've
work?
got a totally blank canvas. What do you do? Try and make your current world in that world, and then have your avatar walking around that world while you sit on your ass getting fat. It's crazy.
Let me add a comment to that, because I was in Second Life from the very beginning. I was in Second Life myself from 2003, and I co-founded a company in Second Life with 3 other people back in 2005, I think, or 2006. And we did some good business with brands, helping them figure out Second Life. But you're right, Brandon, actually, even though I think it's unfair to summarize it all like that, because some brands truly, and let's just backtrack a second, by brands we mean people, the brand managers or the folks responsible for the brand, were trying to do something in Second Life, and they were doing like replicating the real world, and that didn't quite work. They were trying to figure it out. But what you saw of those who did figure it out are the ones you really want to pay attention to, because they're still there. Good example would be IBM. IBM has been in Second Life for, now it must be going on 7 years. They're not selling IBM stuff. They're actually using it as a way to help people figure out how virtual teamwork works in a collaborative sense in a global organization where people are in all sorts of places. How you get together and get to know someone through a virtual persona, i.e. an avatar. And they're publishing a lot of their research. Second Life itself as a platform have enabled last year you to export yourself out of that world into another world, and they actually did a deal with IBM to experiment with that. But
IBM are also very savvy, because they know
social business.
Well, they also know that they're a business of geeks, and geeks hang out in Second Life. And if you're going to want to recruit good people, you may find them in a virtual world for free rather than spending thousands.
But Second Life was ahead of its time, in my opinion. The interface and so forth required powerful computers and all that. So lots not going for it. It was for the early adopters, the enthusiasts, the geeks and so forth, and people trying to experiment. And it was, in my view, like social networking today, a reflection of the real world, the good and the bad. A lot of weird stuff going on in Second Life, that's a fact.
But in some ways, they're going to replace the high street. I doubt it.
No. People were saying stuff like that. I mean, you had the big one that comes to my mind, American Apparel.
People latch onto anything that's new and say, this is the thing that's going to replace everything else.
Behaviours.
It's not. There's lots of things going along, and some of those will evolve into maybe the things come next. But any one thing on its own isn't the future.
I mean, I remember the BBC doing stuff in Second Life, notably radio. I mean, Radio 1, with the roadshows I do around the country, were broadcasting into Second Life. I went to a lot of those. I went to one at Sheffield in Second Life. That was great music. I could have just plugged in on my machine and pulled it off their feed, but it was more fun doing it that way. I could see the people, you know.
Yeah, we made a TV so you could watch TV.
Yes, that's right. I've seen that too.
Watch your avatar watching TV.
Hey, that's your work, wasn't it? Yeah.
We've got another question.
That was cool. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I think the main thing that we're all really talking about here is interaction, and that's what's making everything so popular with social media, and the fact that one of the things that we can be looking at doing in retail stores and trying to sort of find that balance is by using that imagination and making in-store interactive environments. So Apple do it really well. They get people to come in and you can use their products, and you're all really involved, and they've got people walking around with their things on their hips and all stuff, and that works really well. But for other stores as well, you can start creating environments where people can come in and actually have an experience, and then what they'll do is they'll tweet about it and say, this is amazing, look what X, Y, and Z are doing. And then so where they might be have a threat of having all the online marketing, all the online shopping sort of taking away their business, actually what you're doing is you're promoting yourself online through your consumers, so they're actually doing your job for you. So I think the interesting, or the most key point in all of this is really interaction. That's what we like as a consumer. Yeah. We want to be part of it. Ownership, we said that just now. We want to be able to be part of that whole experience and feel like we're we're doing it ourselves. You know, we don't like being sold to anymore. We want to be sort of leading the way.
That actually raises another big point, which I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to throw it out to Brandon and Luke in particular, about the shifts in our perceptions of big brands. I mean, much of this sort of thing you've described tends to be well-known brands because they've got the resourcing and the I guess the business objectives going ahead to do something like that. I mean, the Topshop example I mentioned earlier, that also they did something else too with taking photos, an animated photo booth. People could go in there and try on their clothes. They'd photograph them and stick it up on the website and on the store's windows. So people would talk about that, and they did. You don't see that in your local little shop in Wokingham or somewhere where I live. But I'm wondering whether surveys and research we constantly see that talks about the declining trust we have as individuals in big corporates, in the leaders of those big companies, and indeed in brands. There was a survey published last week by Havas in France that was, I can't remember how many countries, like 16 countries, 5,000 people they interviewed. And the average response to the question, would you be upset if all of your favourite brands were not here anymore tomorrow? 73% said no, we couldn't care less. That was the average. The UK was 92%. And you're talking of, you know, consumer brands that you just name any, Adidas, Google, Microsoft, Vodafone, all of those. People said we could care less if they weren't here tomorrow. And the depth reasoning, when you drill into some of the research, is all to do with the perception that they are not honest in how they communicate with me as their consumer. So this whole thing about Facebook likes, no, these are marketing gimmicks. People don't like it. And so that translated into that research. And you see it illustrated in other ways too. So when you see some of these innovative ideas, is this perhaps one way in which brands can try and re-establish some or reconstruct some sense of trust with individuals? I mean, I know this is one of your pet things.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see blog posts by me all over the place about this kind of specific topic. But that's the thing. I don't think it's because social media engagement has become the big thing. If you're into marketing and you're chasing the likes, the shares, the comments on Facebook, because that means people share it with their friends. And it's become quite cynical in some areas. There are loads of examples. There is a page on Facebook now called the Condescending Corporate Brand page, where you can go and it outs examples of brands being really condescending.
It's the most liked page on Facebook.
It is. So anyway, I mean, there is a slight issue with that. And I think actually most of us can spot cynical marketing ploys just like that. We can just spot them, and we know, and it destroys trust, and it doesn't, make us like that brand or build any relationship with that brand. So I think this has to go deeper than that. And you have to think about the relationship that you have with your customers, and think about, being as personal as you can. I think human, actual named people is a big important thing. Do you do that? Is that?
No, it's just it's bringing back that element of fun. It's making that whole experience. The minute you walk down the high street, fun all of a sudden. And where 20, 30 years ago, you used to go to the high street and there'd be that little toy that you put money in and your kid would sit there and have a whale of a time. They're all gone because it's old. But what you can replace it with is other fun stuff, which is where the imagination comes. I think there's a massive gap to fill with regard to that. Social media and all of the digital side might be going mental, but on the same side, there's huge, great big gaps that we can start filling as brands, as retailers, in order to start getting people to actually talk about, this is so cool, I've just done this today. And then you're sort of entering that social media side by doing something really good with your own brand.
Is it perhaps, what you said is very interesting about the fun things aren't there anymore. I mean, do you not sense, again, there's no revelatory comment here, by the way, because you're all going to nod, I'm sure, but I certainly get the sense every town I go to, this homogenous place, and it's been like that for at least a decade. So are we not seeing kind of like the pinnacle, the apogee, as it were, of our complete and utter disillusionment with the average high street? Does that not feed on the fact that we don't want to go there because there's traffic, there's congestion? It's the same old every town you go to. So when I hear stories of towns, and I can't remember the one that I'm in my mind, frankly, right now, where residents have somehow persuaded people to open up derelict shops and sell. They've done something with the owners of those stores that are empty to do kind of long-term pop-up shops that are local and individual. Deals with the owners for low rents and all this kind of stuff. And this is a local thing. And I'm thinking, wow, that's imagination. That is something at a local level. No one's trying to solve that huge, big picture of the whole country. They're looking at a local community, just like that coffee shop in Cambridge.
There is an interesting parallel, actually. So a lot of the clients I work with in Cambridge are tech companies. And the first thing that they always say to me when they walk in is, we're really boring, all right? We're really boring. You'll never make us into anything on social. But actually, that's the big opportunity for me, because there's a whole green field of nothingness for us to go running into and being different and special and out there, you know. And so it's wonderful for us. And the high street's no different. I mean, you're right. It's been at this bland, boring landscape. So for companies like yours, what's your company called? Is it the shop?
Z Studio.
There you go. Get it in there. If you are different, if you are the big, the big shining fun place,
But I don't think it has to necessarily be so big and like
small shining fun place.
Yeah, no, but I mean, imagination is the key point there, which we've said loads. And actually, you don't need a huge amount of money. You just need to know what to do with the advancements in technology or the advancements in social media or whatever, and utilise it to your own advantage. So I don't think it has to cost particularly an arm and a leg. You just need to get that opportunity and do it now, because now's the time to do it.
Let me quickly ask Brandon on this, a related question to all this, because to me this is like, okay, to do something that's experiential, let's say, it's different, that's fun and so forth, do you need to be physically somewhere? Can it not just be online? Or rather, you've got your physical place, sure, but would online be better to attract interest to where you are physically, and would it matter actually to individuals? And that, I think, is related to a comment you made earlier about no one would really care if the high street was not there anymore. I mean, would that solve that, address that issue? Not solve it necessarily.
I think people do want to get out occasionally. Yeah.
More,
maybe.
More, yeah. Get out more, yeah.
I don't know about more, maybe just occasionally.
Yeah,
but yeah, and when you go out, you want to discover something that you weren't looking for. Yeah, that's what makes things interesting. And if you know what's already there, you tend to not go someplace. But if you know it's changing all the time, then you're more likely to go and have a look and see what's going on. And I think that's one of the downsides of social stuff is you think you know everything that's going on everywhere, so you never go and look for anything new. You only know what people have told you, and you figure that's the total extent that's available. And it's not, there's a lot more things. So there's a question of who are the people that discover the things that then spread through their social networks, and then everyone else comes in on. And that's one of the downsides of all this, is when interesting things come up, you find actually the tickets to that thing's sold out because it's been on Facebook and you've no chance of getting in. And that's one of the downsides of current entertainment getting into the social stuff is everywhere's sold out, usually to tourists. Which is great for the tourist industry, but if you want to go see a particular show or whatever, there's just no chance of getting in. And actually, because they say there's no chance of getting in, you don't even try. So I went to Somerset House when they were having some interactive thing going on, and it was totally sold out. So I just went and says, are there any no-shows? And I said, well, just wait here 5 minutes, 10 minutes, see if nobody shows up for the next one. And I just got straight in within 5 minutes. But if I hadn't actually gone there speculative and thought, just have a wander around and see what's going on, I would never have seen that production at all.
So there's a consequence then of getting known and getting widely discovered online as you go somewhere. And I see this myself in where I live, I'm sure you do. You meet someone for a Sunday drink in the pub on a Sunday, your favourite pub, you go there at 12:10, the car park's already packed, there's 300 people queuing at the bar. And it's like that all the time because they found out about it through social networks, typically. So we're coming to our conclusion, and I guess I would summarise what we've talked about, and tell me if you agree with this, by the way. Particularly in relation to that specific question that we touched at the beginning, is a digital world a threat or a boon to the high street? And listening to what some of you have said in the comments you've offered here is dead simple. Actually, Brandon's response is very, very good. But to me, it's like, yes, there are things you can do. And yes, it's flipped for me to say just needs a bit of imagination, but actually that's exactly what it does need. But not just that, it needs... In your example, you were talking about local, and it needs to be something that is local in your community, it seems to me, or in your community of influence, even if it's not physically local. So it's not the huge picture that I see everyone trying to address, and it's daunting, you can't do it. But it's also got to be, and this is nothing new, something people want. And therein is the missing bit I see in a lot of ideas that I've heard about recently, in particular. People talking about doing X, Y, and Z, and yet what they're offering is no different to what anyone else does. You can get it cheaper someplace else anyway. So you've got to have something that differentiates what you're doing, as well as the fun, the experiential aspect to it, the imagination that you bring to bear. So there are things that we can do. Now, that's not to say that therefore there's a conclusion here. It's not. This is an evolutionary step. Any additional views to that? In which case, I guess we conclude. Thank you very much.